And so we're seeing the European Union and all these other institutions of power becoming more and more blatant in the fact that that's what they are, dictatorships. And so this Rubicon that's been crossed with this Lisbon Treaty is going to take us into an era very, very soon where vast numbers of people will realize, actually, we're seeing another version of what humanity rejected centuries ago, which is the overt dictatorship by the few of the many. How we respond to that will decide how long it goes on for.
You mentioned, which is interesting, basically how the Roman Church has been built on a previous religion, pretty much.
Right.
They also use the name Europe. Europe, of course, which comes from Europa.
Which is another name for the goddess, another name for Semiramis, and the goddess under so many names in different communities and societies. Absolutely. We're seeing it re-emerging from behind the shield, from behind the smokescreen.
Because in one way you can look at that, the EU even have, in some cases, statues of Europa riding the bull, Zeus, you know, and in Christian lore that could be interpreted as the woman who's riding the beast, you know, the harlot. If we look at it from the Bible again, it's Babylon, the great mother of harlots and of earth's abominations. So in one way you wonder, which one is it then? Is it that she's the bride of the devil or the mother of God here? Who are we talking about? Because if I just show you quickly, you've probably seen these images already. But that's the comparison of the European Parliament and Peter Bruegel's Tower of Babel. And of course, merged together, they look like the same. So are they building the Tower of Babel? Or are they building the Babylonian Empire again? But they're doing that under the guise of Christianity. Or what do you think is going on there?
Well, all the way through this period, from Babylon, Sumer, ancient Egypt, right through the present day, the same network of interbreeding families and bloodlines have been at work. And they've been following the same religion, worshipping the same, quote, gods. It's all been the same stream of belief, of manipulation of families all the way through. But there have been periods where they've had to hide it. And there's periods when they've put it in front of our faces because they were confident enough that they could get away with it. So if you go further back, they were openly displaying their human sacrifice, their idols, their symbols, the whole thing. And then they went through this period where they felt necessary to do it covertly. And what we're seeing now is the re-emergence of putting it in our face. Now, this is happening in two ways. First of all, they're doing that. But secondly, as a result of a tremendous amount of research by people over the last few years, and the internet and books, etc., increasingly vast numbers of people are aware of these symbols, they're aware of the bloodlines, they're aware of the agenda. And what's actually happening, what conspiracy research is actually about, is bringing from the subconscious, the subliminal, to the conscious mind. So if you show someone a subliminal advertisement, for instance, and they look at it, the conscious mind won't see it. Almost everyone's conscious mind won't see it. When you point out where the subliminal is, and then show it them again and again, anytime, the first thing they will see is the subliminal they couldn't see before, right? This is the way it works. I mean, it's amazing, but it's the way it works. Because what you've done is you brought it to conscious awareness. Now, as researchers, etc., have brought these things to public attention, they are bringing them out of the subconscious, out of the subliminal. And so people are seeing these things like they wouldn't have seen them before. So to an extent, they're putting it more and more in our face. But allied with that, people are seeing it more and more, because a lot of things that were there before, like the Statue of Liberty, which is a classic representation of the goddess of Babylon in the way that she was portrayed, holding the torch, the lighted torch, which was the symbol of Nimrod, the Babylonian father god. And actually, she's actually standing in New York Harbor on a depiction of the sun. So it's all kind of sun-moon symbolism, which is basically the religions of these people, because that's another story. The sun-moon is covertly hiding the real meaning for those symbols. But so people are seeing it more, and will go on doing so, because these families are seeking to impose a global Roman Empire and a global Babylonian Empire, if you like, and therefore the symbols that they will use will be the symbols they've always used, and that's where it's becoming more blatant to people as they become more aware of what's going on.
If we look at some of the more obvious symbolism of the European Union, if we look at the flag then, for instance, again, we have the 12 stars in the flag. Do you think that that's an astrological / zodiacal reference? Is it a Catholic reference with the Mother Mary and her 12 stars around her head? Or if we take it further, do you think could it be like the 12 lost tribes of Israel? Is it a Zionist reference here as well? What do you think?
Well, people use symbols for different reasons, and they can have different meanings for the same symbol. But what is blatantly clear is that the 12 stars in a circle are an ancient symbol of the goddess. So, in the book of Revelation, which you can read in the Bible, you've got the 12 stars around the goddess figure, and the story that's told, cover story, is that there was a gentleman who was involved well before the European Union and the European community became established, who was involved in the background early administration of the whole process of introducing it, who was walking along and looked up, and he saw a statue of Mother Mary, and he looked up and he saw the stars around her head, and it was a clear blue sky, and he looked up and he saw the stars and the clear blue sky and said, that must be the symbol of the European Union. And he went along and he said it to his associates, and they said, that's a good idea, and we're asked to believe that. It's a blatant symbol of at least on one level, the goddess figure. And the symbolism you've mentioned of the goddess Europa riding the bull. Well, the bull is the god figure. It's the Nimrod figure, and you've got commemorative coins being minted by the European Union over the years. And there was one in 2005 to 2006, something like that, which has Europa riding the bull. I mean, they're ancient, esoteric, occult ritual symbols are all over the place, because these families are that are behind the European Union were behind the Babylonian Empire, the Roman Empire. It's a continuation. It's not something new. It just changes the mask on its face as it moves through history.
And also, you mentioned Rothschild as being behind the creation of the European Union as well. And actually, yesterday I found an interesting thing regarding Rothschild. They said this: in 1954, Baron Robert Rothschild was appointed chef de cabinet of Paul Henry Spaak at the Belgian Foreign Ministry. For the next 2 years, he worked together with Spaak and, maybe butchering his name here, Jean-Charles Snoy et de Oppers, or something like that, on the Treaty of Rome. Before the final signing of the treaty in 1957, shortly before the treaty was signed, Rothschild standing beside Spaak, gazing over the Forum Romanum in Rome, when Spaak said, I think that we have re-established the Roman Empire without a single shot being fired. Anything you want to comment in regards to that?
Exactly what they've done. Like I say, they want a global Roman Empire. The Rothschilds are fundamental to this. They are a family that were once called the Bowers, who were a notorious if you say, black magic, occult, secret society type family who changed their name to Rothschild, Red Shield. And from that time, they grasped control of the now global economic system. They control all global finance virtually that has any effect on people's lives anyway. And they operate as if not the spider, then the operational organization of the spider. They are the people that are closest to the spider and at the center of this global secret society web, and they hand out the agenda and make sure it's played out through the web in every country. And so they don't just control the financial level, they control the corporations, and they control governments, and they are also the guiding, controlling force behind a network of organizations which were spawned from a secret society started in Britain in the late 19th century called the Round Table. And the offshoot satellite organizations of this central core Rothschild-controlled secret society, the Round Table, they started off in 1920 with the Royal Institute of International Affairs. Watch the think tanks. Look how the world is awash with think tanks, right? The think tanks are the means through which this whole thing is orchestrated overwhelmingly. So you have a think tank called the Royal Institute of International Affairs in London. A year later, 1921, Council on Foreign Relations, which dominates United States foreign policy and the State Department in America, etc. Then you had the Club of Rome, I think that was 1968, that was set up to manipulate the environment and the environmental movement to justify global transformation. And this is where the lie of human-caused climate change has come from. 1954, you had the Bilderberg Group, and then in 1973, you had the Trilateral Commission, which was co-created by David Rockefeller, and the Rockefellers are a subordinate bloodline within the network to the Rothschilds. They represent the Rothschilds in America, the wider world too, but especially America. And the other co-creator of the Trilateral Commission was Zbigniew Brzezinski, President Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, who is one of the prime mentors of Barack Obama, who was just another, mask on the same face that as Bush was. And the Bilderberg Group is very, very important in the creation and the centralization of power within the European Union. For people who are new to these organizations, what they are is coordinating networks to coordinate a common policy, a common view among different countries, different people in banks, people in government, people in NATO, people in intelligence agencies. It's to create a coordination of view and of policy. And the Bilderberg Group has been one of the prime manipulators of the policy of of centralization of power in Europe. It's been from 1954, one of its prime motives has been to create the European Union as we now have. And it's very obvious and blatant that what we're seeing now was planned from the start. We have a situation where Russian dissidents who've come out of the old Soviet Union are describing the European Union quite rightly as a mirror in structure of the Soviet Union with the Politburo, etc. And some of them, one of them in particular, tells the story of having seen reports or official reports of a meeting that Mikhail Gorbachev had when he was the leader of the Soviet Union, with David Rockefeller and Henry Kissinger from the Trilateral Commission and Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, where in the middle of the conversation, d'Estaing said, Mr. President, this is what's going to happen within a certain number of years. In other words, what's happening now with the Treaty of Lisbon, the Lisbon Treaty, is going to happen in Europe, and it's going to happen in this period of years. So basically, you better get used to it. Now, what's interesting is two things. First of all, if France and the Netherlands had not voted no to the original constitution, then d'Estaing's timescale would have been virtually exact what he said, the number of years hence that this was going to come in. It's only been delayed because of those referendums, which meant they had to go through the process of going from a constitution to a treaty and all the rest of it. The other interesting thing is the person who oversaw the writing of the constitution was Valéry Giscard d'Estaing. So, Bilderberg Group, by the way. And we had a guy in the UK who was a practicing Satanist and serial child killer. I said that in my books when he was alive, no comeback because it's true, called Ted Heath. Ted Heath was Prime Minister of Britain from 1970 to 74, and he was the man who signed us into the European community and knowing what it was going to be. And he was one of the obsessive campaigners for us to go in right through the 60s. We have in Britain something called the 30-year rule, where cabinet papers are released after 30 years. Some of them are not released then because of national security, in other words, security of the agenda. But what came out in the 30-year rule in terms of Ted Heath is he had agreed, while denying it in public, to the rundown of the British fishing industry, the rundown of British agriculture, the rundown of manufacturing industry, right at the start. We're talking the early 1970s, because, again, what is happening was planned from the start. They have had this whole plan of turning the whole of Europe into effect a single unit. So before all these unions came in, you would have a country, and this part of the country would be the coal mining. If they had coal resources, this part would be industry. This part would do that. This part would do that. Different parts of the country specialize in different things. So the plan has been to do that to Europe. So right from the start, amazing but true, they were dictating which parts of Europe would specialize in what. So they decided that places like Germany would do this and that, but Britain, that would concentrate on service industries like insurance and banking and finance, and that therefore, because agriculture and industry and stuff like that was going to specialize elsewhere, in Britain all those things were going to be run down. And so while people in Britain and every other country were seeing these kind of changes in the way the country was, like through the Margaret Thatcher era, through the 80s, that Conservative government absolutely targeted, on purpose, blatantly, knowingly, at the core level, the coal industry in Britain. So we don't have a coal industry now. And we are an island, and yet our fishing industry is being decimated by European Union law. And so what people have perceived over the decades of the European Union as their countries changing and thinking, why is it happening? Now it's clear why. It was all being prepared for where we are. The idea is to break the countries of Europe up into regions, because the idea is to de-unify any unification of response to the edifice of power above. Now, if you look around the world, whether it's the family, whether it's any grouping that can pull people together as a unit, and in a unified way, a unified response, they're being targeted. And one of those unification forces is a sense of nation, a sense of country. So what we're seeing, not just in Europe, but blatantly in Europe, is the bringing down of borders. For what? For what reason? Same in America, it's happening. So that people from other cultures can pour into other cultures, and people from this culture can pour into that culture. Now, on the face of it, people might say, and I might agree with them, well, you know, we're all kind of just human beings. But if we're going to be streetwise, we need to understand not just what's happening, but why it's happening. And why it's happening on one key level is the plan is to destroy any sense of nation, any sense of unique culture. I'm now seeing articles, and I have been for a while in British newspapers, saying, what is it to be British anymore? You know, is it eggs and bacon for breakfast? I mean, is it fish and chips? What is it to be British anymore? What's it mean? And that's the idea. The idea is to break down any of that. And I don't say that from a nationalistic point of view, because I don't actually recognize myself as British. I'm just consciousness having an experience. I mean, you can stick all the other labels. I'm not interested. But if we, like I say, if we're going to be streetwise, we have to see what is happening from the perspective and the intended outcome of those that are doing it. And this is all part of destroying a sense of uniqueness in any way. So you've got this great blob mentality that we call Europe. And if you've got a real strong sense of nation, this is why they're doing the same game big time on the United States, which at one point had a massive sense of nation and what it was. If you've got a sense of nation, then when things are suggested that break your nation up into regions, that take your ability to govern yourselves to an outside agency, if you've got a sense of nationhood, we're American, we're British, we're not having this, break that up, people go much more quietly. And that's the idea. They want to, and the other interesting thing is some of the maps that have come to light that have been in British newspapers from time to time over the years, they don't just turn Britain into a series of regions, but they take this region of Britain and they clump it together in a regional group with a region in France and a region in Scandinavia. Again, all deunifying. So the only unified force in the entire structure are the bureaucrats sitting around a table at the centre. That's the idea. It's being done mercilessly and has been unfolding for decades because the blueprint was there right from the start.
A ruthless human being is more easily controlled. It's as easy as that. Although everyone might not identify, as you say, with their nation or with their culture even, that is at least one fundamental point in many people's lives, and when they take that away, then it's much easier to control that human being, obviously.
Exactly, that's the idea.
Joining of Israel into the European Union, there have been talks of them joining as well, and which might again allude to the Zionist connection to the European Union and Israel. Because Kudnov-Kalergi apparently had, well, if you want to term the very racist views in terms of how he viewed the Jewish race as supreme to the rest of the European people and so forth. Do you think that's the case? Do you think they go hand in hand? We talked about the Rome connection, obviously, but in terms of Zionism, if we look at that from one thing, are those separate, or do they go hand in hand, Rome and Israel, or Zionists?
They're all connected, and they're connected through the House of Rothschild. See, if people just took a breath and looked at the whole scene, they would ask a series of questions. Why does that slither of land called Israel, and I've driven around it, and you can virtually drive around it in a day, why does that have so much power? Why is it the biggest, by far, recipient of American aid when it is one of the richest per capita countries in the world? Why does it have the biggest F-16 fleet outside America? How come it can have a very considerable arsenal of nuclear weapons, refuse to sign a non-proliferation treaty, and have a breathtaking agreement which has just been confirmed by Barack Obama in the last few months, that they have a policy in terms of America and other countries and Israel, that they don't ask whether they've got nuclear weapons, and therefore Israel doesn't have to say if they have or not. This is an official policy. Why, when they pepper bomb the most crowded piece of land in the world and instigate slaughter on a shocking scale, does the international community, apart from one or two people, say nothing? Simple. The House of Rothschild controls Israel. It created Israel. And more than that, it created a political philosophy. Note, a political philosophy called Zionism. What they've brilliantly done, though it's breaking down, is they have equated Jewish people as a race with Zionism, which is a political philosophy. And at its core is a secret society, connects into the other secret societies. And so if you challenge Zionism and its horrors and its impositions and its hypocrisy and its slaughter, you are equated with being prejudiced against Jewish people. What they don't tell you is significant numbers of Jewish people actually are appalled by Zionism and actually openly protest against it. And there's some fantastic young people in Israel that refuse to serve in the military and end up in jail because of it. And, you know, they are incredible people to have that sense of value. The questions that I've just posed can be answered very, very easily. The House of Rothschild control American politics. They control the neocons that control Bush. They control what I call the democons that control Obama. And in the White House, as I speak, we have the White House Chief of Staff, Rahm Emanuel, who is the puppeteer, immediate puppeteer of Obama, and his father actually served in an Israeli Zionist terror group called Irgun, which, with others, bombed Israel into existence and forced 750 to 800,000 Palestinians to leave their homeland after 1948. The reason, therefore, that Israel is the biggest recipient of American aid and military support is because this hand, called the House of Rothschild, takes the money from the United States and hands it to this hand, called Israel, of the House of Rothschild, and says, thank you very much. The reason that there's no questioning of Israeli nuclear capability, that they get away literally with mass murder time and time again, is because the House of Rothschild also controls the countries of the European Union and controls the European Union. I mean, Tony Blair is a yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir, how high would you like me to jump sir, frontman for the House of Rothschild. So who do they put in after he left the British government as negotiator of peace in Israel? Tony bloody Blair. What shall I say, Mr. Rothschild? Thank you very much. Thank you. That's thank you. Thank you. And that's it. So when you've got the same force controlling all these different agencies, then of course they're going to be coordinated. That's why Israel gets away with what it gets away with. And if people think that's anti-Semitic, well, actually anti-Semitic means anti-Arab, by the way, then they'll have to take it and shove it somewhere where the sun don't shine. Because I ain't shutting up about this, because it's fundamental to understanding the world and to understanding the European Union and world events. The Jewish people in general have been mercilessly used by the House of Rothschild and their front secret society, satanic secret society called Zionism, as a front which they can hide behind. So it is House of Rothschild organizations like B'nai B'rith, Sons of the Covenant, who created an organization called the Anti-Defamation League, which goes around defaming everyone, ironically, who have not just campaign for hate laws that stop you exposing these people. They've actually written the bloody legislation in America, in North America, and Canada. And so these hate laws, which say you can't say this, you can't say that because that's prejudicial and all that, they're not there to protect gay people. Everyone to their own, I say. I couldn't care less. They're not there to protect Jewish people or minorities. They're there simply to stop legitimate investigation of the Rothschilds and its network. That's what they're there for. And they are in so many ways, the Rothschilds, at operational level, the center of the spider's web. And they need to be exposed, because if they get exposed and they go, when I say go, they are removed from their positions of power. Because, to be honest, if they went to jail for what they have been responsible for, the House of Rothschild, they would have to reincarnate hundreds of times to complete the sentence. And we've ignored them, or we've not ignored them. People have ignored their power for long enough because they've brilliantly hidden it. It needs the light shone on it, because when they come down, in so many ways, the house of cards comes down.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.